Another thing that Ray Peat is known for is healthy gut microbiome is nonsense.
Yeah, so this is a massively controversial one. And so how do I justify and explain this one? So where he's coming from with this is that when you have, the more bacteria that you have in your digestive tract, the more they're going to create stuff, a lot of which is probably not beneficial for you. So endotoxin being the most voluminous and most famous one. But also, another thing that these organisms create, other than a bunch of other toxins, is they also create neurotransmitters, which can very strongly impact how we feel in a negative way, especially if we have higher intestinal permeability, also known as a leaky gut. Then more of those things can get into our bloodstream, and it can affect how we feel. And this has definitely been the case in my anecdotal experience. So as well as endotoxin, the serotonin, that's a big subject, but serotonin can make you feel not good if you have an excess of it. I think that's well known in the literature. And if we have certain bacteria in our gut that are creating that serotonin, which a lot of them do, and that gets into our bloodstream, that can make us feel worse. Same for noradrenaline or norepinephrine. That's something that is produced by many different bacteria that are commonly in the digestive tract. That can make us feel more anxiety. Same for histamine. That's another neurotransmitter that is commonly produced by the organisms in the gut. That can lead us to have allergic reactions and other kind of histamine symptoms like a blocked nose and swelling throat and red rashes on the skin and all the rest of it. So from Dr. Peat's perspective, my understanding is that it's better to just reduce all of that as much as possible on a practical level. So he was a big fan of antibiotics if necessary, and he was a big fan of especially antibiotics that work more on the gut bacteria rather than killing bacteria maybe throughout the whole body. Like I think rifaximin is an example of that kind of antibiotic, but I think he was more a favor of the older antibiotics like monocycline and I think sulfur, some kind of sulfur one, I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, like bottom line is less organisms, the better, was his perspective, just as he also believed less unsaturated fats, the better. Now, what about the idea that these organisms are creating nutrients that our body actually needs or other compounds that our body actually needs? From his perspective, you can get all of that from diet if you're eating the right kind of diet. So you don't really need that. The other perspective would be is that they're always going to be there to some degree. You don't have to be afraid of knocking them back too much. You just want to knock them back as much as possible. He recommended certain things like a raw carrot, grated carrot salad diet, the idea of which was not to digest it, but to have it move through you to work as an antibiotic and also as a fiber source. I think button mushrooms was another one that he considered to be a mild antibiotic. And there were a few things like that he recommended having on a daily basis. He is also recommended charcoal, which I'm a huge fan of recommending. It's not an antibiotic, but it is effective at mopping up many of the poisons that those organisms create. But I would say his biggest focus of all, in terms of reducing those organisms in the intestines, was actually not feeding them. And so that's why he was against starch. He was against a lot of forms of soluble fiber like beans and grains and stuff like that as well, because they feed those organisms. And so from his perspective, eating a diet that doesn't feed those organisms, that kills them liberally, and then just reduce them as much as possible, and then also includes all the nutrients that you need, was beneficial. Is he right about that? I don't know. But it's an interesting thing to consider. The idea that having a lot of organisms in your intestines is a good thing is a relatively recent one in the scientific community, and it's definitely not hard science and it's not been proven. Now, what has been shown many, many times with research is that by certain alterations in the microbiome, it can improve someone's health, right? Fecal implants are an example of that, where adding in different bacteria makes a person much healthier than before. So, of course, there is some validity to the idea that you're better off having some bacteria than others. You're better off having some pathogens than others. You're better off having some organisms than others. And there's also evidence that some organisms have a genuinely beneficial effect. However, could it be true that you're better off just having as little as possible of all of them? That's something that hasn't been fully investigated and hasn't been fully proven either way. But it was definitely Dr. Peat's perspective. One of the things that feeds those organisms is especially soluble fiber from a normal point of view. And there is lots of evidence. I remember there was a whole book on it I read years ago called The Fiber Menace that just recounted study after study after study, basically showing that a lot of people got better of all kinds of health issues, especially digestive issues, when they reduced and even removed fiber altogether. So that would support the idea that just feeding those organisms less will resolve all kinds of health issues and all kinds of digestive issues. There is also the fact that probiotics, although they're considered beneficial in many cases, are not universally beneficial. There is no probiotic, whether it's a natural source like sauerkraut or kefir or whatever, or whether it's buying it, lactobacillus in a supplement, acidophilus or bifidum or whatever, that agrees with everyone. So with everyone, no matter how beneficial it's supposed to be, it could make them worse. And so it's an interesting idea that actually, rather than trying to have the right balance and all the rest of it, let's just get rid of them. Like overall, they're not really helping us. Is it accurate? I don't know, but it's similar to the idea of you'd be better off with no unsaturated fats, right? And I think it may actually be similar to that in that if you have a bunch of unsaturated fats, that it's better to have a higher ratio of omega-3 to omega-6. And it may be similar that if you have a bunch of bacteria in your digestive tract, it's probably better to have some of the bifidum, some of the lactobacillus, some of the bacteroidetes, etc. Like there is such a thing as a better or worse microbiome, but maybe it's true that it's better to just have less microbiome than more altogether. That was Dr. Peat's perspective. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Rejuvenate podcast. If you want to watch the full episode that came from, just click on the link above. Or if you just want to watch our latest video, then click the link below. And make sure that you subscribe to the channel and like the video. Thank you.